welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and today we are going to be starting a multi-part special on New York Comic Con. Recently, we've attended New York Comic Con, and not only did we do it as participants in terms of being able to go and look at the show, but we were actually part of the show this time around. We were representing GeekFest Rants at the Podcast Arena section of the show floor. We rented a table and we were out there basically pitching our show and letting people know about our show and handing out pamphlets and freebies, and we had a raffle and we had a whole bunch of stuff like that. And we were there for all 4 days. Now, the show itself ran from Thursday to Sunday. And different things happened on those days depending on the volume of people and the actual events that are scheduled. The first day was Thursday, which was a pretty low attendance day because obviously most people are working on Thursdays, so they kind of keep it slow. And that's also mainly a setup day, one of the last setup days. Obviously, if you're there selling, for example, t-shirts or toys or whatever, you might need, depending on the rig that you bring with you, the booth space you have and the amount of material that you bring with you, you might need extra days to set up. And some people did that. There were some displays there on the show floor, which were almost 2-story high displays. And it's amazing the rigs that they get in there. Some of the simpler ones, they were just selling t-shirts. And they had 2 areas on the show floor where they had these 2-story high, boxed, caged in kind of areas where, to set that up, it could take a couple days, it could take a good day or so. That's heavy equipment they're bringing in to set up all these racks so they can mount all their t-shirts. And they're very simple setups, similar to ours, where all you got is a table. It all depends on the level that you are there to promote or sell. The cheaper low-end stuff like ours is very simple. There's your table, here's a couple chairs, get to work. But some of those other ones were huge. I mean, some of these, they had an Avenger exhibit area where they had a Captain America suit behind glass and a whole stage set up to look like the Avengers planning room or meeting room. This is heavy equipment that gets brought in there. Marvel had these huge displays. Hasbro had these huge displays. There were video game people with these huge setups where people would walk into their whole area. It would be almost like a miniature trailer. You would walk into there. It's not even a booth. It's an area. It's a whole area. So those are the big type of displays that earlier in the week, I'm sure they're setting it up and preparing for it. But we went in on Thursday. Thursday was really our first day. And the way it worked out was that we would go in, and the hours for Thursday were noon to 4 and then 4 to 7. From noon to 4, it was mainly for press, exhibitors, VIPs, people with 4-day passes. It was very limited, the amount of people and the amount of time that they opened Thursday for. And again, it's mostly a setup day, and it's a good day, especially for the press, to come in and take pictures without having, 100,000 people milling about. That's the day where most of the pictures for the press get taken, not only in the exhibit halls, but also on the other areas of the building that there are things you could see. They had the main exhibit hall, which is the one I'm talking about, which is a huge area. I couldn't even explain to you how big it is. It wasn't the Jacob Javits Center in New York City. Anybody familiar with the Jacob Javits? They do the car shows every year. They do the boat shows. They do a whole bunch of big convention type shows, and it looked like we were using just about everything on that floor area. It was just gigantic. Then they had a separate area on the north concourse of the building. If you just kept walking north, a completely separate hall, which was set up for all of the autographing sections of the convention. Anytime you wanted to go purchase an autograph, you would go to this other section, and the movie stars and famous people would be assigned a certain table, and you would line up on their table, and at a certain spot you would pay and get your picture. And in that area, they also had some other additional displays. They had a couple of cars from films, a couple of Batmobiles, a Back to the Future car. They also had an area where they had a Red Tails interactive simulator ride. That's from an upcoming movie, which is actually a Lucasfilm movie about the Tuskegee Airmen. So they had a simulator ride of, I guess, what it's like to fly around in a World War II fighter. So that's all on the second floor. I mean, you enter the building through the second floor, you go to this northern section of the building to the second floor, you go up one floor to the third floor. It's the exhibit hall, the main area we were in, where all the exhibitors and all the stuff is being sold. That was up on the third floor. And then if you go down a level below 2 into level 1, you have your meeting rooms and theaters. That's where the big giant presentations were taking place, which we'll talk about on some of our future shows. And also the panels, any panels that one could attend, you would go to these meeting rooms, and that's where they would do them. Again, gigantic, huge areas. This bottom area was just like it was last year. However, the exhibit area, it's important to make a note of this, that the exhibit area was practically twice as big as it was last year. So big difference between last year and this year is not only that the exhibit area was bigger, but they added an extra day. Thursday was an extra day that we never had before. So we went in on Thursday and we showed up kind of early because originally we were told that you got to be there before 12. This way you're all set up by 12, because when 12 o'clock rolls around, they want to be able to inspect everybody's booths and have everything set up, even though they're not letting anybody into the booth areas, the exhibit hall, until 4 o'clock. Between 12 and 4, we were just going to be there and kind of hang out. Well, the little problem we had at first was that when we first showed up, we were located, basically, if you look at the whole exhibit floor, we were located on the northwest corner of the building, right up on that corner of the exhibit hall. And for some reason, they were piling up all of the gift bags that they were giving out all the attendants in that corner of the building. So by the time we showed up, which was somewhere around 10, I believe, 10 or 11 o'clock. We get there, we get to that section. Now, keep in mind, I'm still recovering from foot surgery, so I'm wheeling around in a wheelchair, which took a bit of getting used to. Very painful on the hands and on the shoulders. By the 4th day, I was doing much better. But yeah, that was the first time I had spending so much time on a wheelchair. So we're wheeling all the way to that corner, and when we finally figure out where we're at, we're like, but wait a minute, there's no tables here. It was just a sea of gift bags. I'm talking a gigantic area. Now, you got to keep in mind, you're talking about enough gift bags for about 100,000 people. So we at first had to wait around for about 2 hours, I think it was, from somewhere from 11-ish to 1 in the afternoon. We were waiting for them to just remove those gift bags and start setting up tables in our area. Now, not only was our table not set up when we got there, there were a total of about 6 or 7 rows, each row easily 10, 15 tables that were not set up because of all these gift bags that were still there. So, we were at first a little nervous because like, oh my God, how are we going to get everything ready on time? And then at 4 o'clock, they're going to open the doors and everybody's going to come flying. But luckily, by 1 o'clock, we were able to get in there and set up our booth, which consisted, as you might see on some of our pictures, we have a banner. We purchased a banner. I put together this rig that I had with some spare PVC pipes in order to get the banner up in the air, because we were told also that, you're not allowed to put anything on the walls. You're not allowed to nail anything or tape anything, which we quickly find out that that's not necessarily true, because a lot of people were doing a lot of things that technically were against the rules, but they were doing it anyway. They were putting things on walls. They were moving stuff around, all kinds of stuff like that. They were handing stuff out, So anyway, we know better for the next time. But we had a pretty cool little rig, so it didn't matter where they moved us or anything. We were still there. So we set up our table. We were all ready. And 4 o'clock rolled around, and the first wave of people started coming in. And it was a nice little steady trickle of people. And it gave us a feel of what things were going to be like. We got a lay of the land. After we were all set up, we had a couple of hours to run around there, in my case, wheel around there, and go and take pictures. So that's what we did the first day. I got to know, get familiar with where things are, because it is so gigantic. You lose track of where all these locations are. Things you might want to visit later, you got to figure out where everything is. So the first day we were there, like I said before, the actual available time for people, guests really, to come in and do stuff was from 4 to 7. So from 4 to 7, they opened the doors, people started strolling in, and they had a couple of panels here or there, nothing too crazy, no big stars or anything like that. It's kind of like a slow start day. It's like a prep day, really. And on that first day, we had Brian, one of our co-hosts, come in and help us out, and he also got to go around in the dealer's room and was able to purchase some stuff and that sort of thing. So that was a nice little calm start to the day. By the time we get to the second day, Friday, now this is the first full day. Granted, it's still a Friday, people still at work, so the attendance is not as gigantic on a Friday, but it is considerably bigger than the first day for sure. It's a little crowded. You gotta worm your way around people. And on the second day, Friday, another one of our co-hosts, Steve Vivona, came in, and he was able to work the room. He was able to go all through the dealer's room and the exhibit hall and all that other stuff, take pictures, and he actually got to attend a panel on Friday, because Friday really is when everything starts to really cook. And when he was done with the panel, close to the end of the day ended around 7 p.m., but when he was done with his panel, he came by and we sat down and I interviewed him a little bit about what he saw that day and just in general, how this convention is different than previous conventions he's been to in the past. Steve has a long history of conventions at different periods in his life, and we sat down and chatted about the progression and how we experience, both of us, conventions in a different way. Let's take a listen to Steve.
Hey, Carlos. This is actually my first New York Comic-Con, but it's not the first con I've ever been to in New York. The first con I ever went to was about 25 years ago. My dad took me. It was at the Penta Hotel across from Penn Station. And the first guest I ever saw, kind of bringing it full circle, was Stan Lee. It was a panel that Marvel Comics had sponsored with Stan and who was at the time the editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, Jim Shooter. They were introducing a new subset of the Marvel Universe. It was called the New Universe. And it was for the 25th anniversary of Marvel Comics. They were introducing a new universe that had nothing to do with the characters in the Marvel Universe. They were creating their own new characters, and it was supposedly a world that never had superheroes before. That a certain event happened and created all these beings with superpowers. It went bust. It never went anywhere. It was a big disappointment for them, but it was thrilling for me to see Stan as a 16-year-old kid. He was my idol. He created all my favorite comic characters, and I got his autograph and got to meet him. And today, I got to see him again 25 years later.
Now, before we get to what you experienced today, I like to talk a little bit about those good old days, what I like to call the good old days of conventions. Because back then, just like yourself, I used to go to the Penta, I used to go to the Roosevelt, and back when I used to live in Queens, it was just a subway ride into the city. I remember the first few times my dad took me because I was, I don't know, I must have been like maybe 14, 15 years old or something. And what I used to love about the old days of conventions was that you would pay a set amount of money, 10, 15 bucks at the door, and once you're inside, all the autographs were free back then. It wasn't like it is these days where you got to pay for it's like pay to play. Everything you do here, you got to pay for. Now, granted, you did have a dealer's room, not as gigantic as what we have here today, but back then, you could still do the dealer room and spend your money there. That's where you would spend most of your money. That's also where you would find all these bizarre bootleg videos and all kinds of weird import stuff that nowadays you basically get through the internet. But the autographs was basically you just walk in and whoever's the guest, you either give them the picture that you pre-bought somewhere else, or some of them would actually have pictures that they would sell you right there, and some of them would give you pictures for free. It was a great system back then, and it's been long gone, and I really miss it.
I miss it too. I kind of experienced a little bit of a lull in my convention attendance. Like you, I started out as a teenager, and I really wasn't as big into the autograph scene back then. For me, back then, it was more comics. There weren't as many comic stores around in where I lived in Long Island, and this was a place where I could find anything I needed. And like I said, at the Penta or the Roosevelt. And like you mentioned, bootleg videos. That was huge for me. This is pre-internet, pre-YouTube, pre-all that stuff. And I was able to get my hands on things. Then we're talking about the early 90s here. Things that I had seen when I was a child that I thought I had imagined because it had been so long since I had seen them, and I really wasn't sure if they were real or not. And because there wasn't so much a fan press back then, there was no internet, I was wondering if my mind was playing tricks on me. But this was when I was able to get my hands on things like the Star Wars Holiday Special or the superhero roast, all these things that I showed you guys when we were in college. They were great finds, and I would be able to get them for 20 bucks a shot, 25 bucks a shot.
One more thing I remember that it used to be the great thing about conventions was that major studios would show up with film reels to show you trailers. Again, pre-internet. All of a sudden, they would show you a trailer for a movie. I remember seeing like the RoboCop trailer, like in the mid-'80s. And it's like, what the hell is this piece of crap? And, again, they would show you these trailers. They weren't complete. They were missing sound effects. They were like work print trailers. And that was another thing you could do there that you never do before. The other thing was you could also record. I remember I would bring my video camera. I had not a Hi8, an 8mm video camera, which was brand new back then. And I would record the actual panels of the different actors. And that was almost like another one of these collections I had of actors that I liked or didn't even care too much about, but I could sit there and listen to them and record it, and then I have this collection of stuff. And again, just like the free autographs went away, all of a sudden you started to see notices about, oh, no videotape recording during so-and-so's because he, who knows what he might say or blah, 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 or you don't want this showing up in something. Again, no internet yet, but that was the kind of, cool stuff you could get that you don't have that anymore.
Probably around the mid-90s, I started going to conventions again. And one that was very popular for me and for another one of our colleagues, the other Steve, was the Chiller Show in New Jersey, which started out primarily as a horror convention. And it was mainly autographs, some panels, but it was really heavy on the experience of meeting the actor. And you talked about before the price of autographs going up. This was when it really started to get crazy. I'll talk a little bit about the creation experience as well, because that kind of parallels my experience going to Chiller. But at the time, you could go to Chiller and you could get an autograph maybe $20, $25, and a picture would be free. And that was something I always wanted. I always wanted the picture with the actor. And the actor, as long as you were buying the autograph, the actor was totally fine with taking a picture. And I have tons and tons of pictures of me with these great actors. I might have gone to Chiller 7 or 8 out of 10 years. Not only with Steve, but with some of my other friends from back home. And we met a lot of really, really great horror movie stars. But then that show started to become more mainstream. It started to get a little bit away from the horror, and you would see guests like Larry Hagman. You would have
legendary horror star, yes. Larry Hagman.
You would have, they would still be heavy on genre. You would have George Romero, but a booth away you would have Adam West. Or you'd have Ann Robinson, who was in the original War of the Worlds. They would have professional wrestlers. They would have Lance Guest from The Last Starfighter. I met Tony Burton, who played the trainer, Apollo's trainer in the Rocky films, and the kids from A Christmas Story. So you would have just a smorgasbord of, it was getting away from the purity that it started with. But it was really insane because they had it at a hotel in New Jersey near the Meadowlands, and it was cramped, and it was hard to get around in. The lines went on forever. The smells were just, I don't want to go there. At the same time that I was doing the Chiller shows, I started going to the Creation shows. Now, Creation has been around doing conventions since the early 70s. In fact, they're kind of the originators. They did the first Star Trek convention in New York.
They also did, which I attended back in, I think, 87, the first official Star Wars convention in Los Angeles, which I went to. And that's before the official Celebration conventions occurred. And it's important because that's the first Star Wars convention that George Lucas appeared as the main guest. And not only that, but because it was the 10th anniversary of Star Wars, Gene Roddenberry showed up, Irving Kershner showed up. All the bigwigs of the time showed up to kind of honor George. And that was a great experience. That's a whole other show we got to do.
That's a great one. I would have loved to have been at that one. It's funny because when I was single, I should have been going to more cons. When I got married, that's when I really got the buzz. And I started going around 2002, 2003, I started going. I remember I went to a few Creation shows in the mid-90s, again with our colleague Steve. I went with you to New Jersey. We saw Brent Spiner. We saw Marina Sirtis. So that was a big show that we went to. But again, before this, I really wasn't into the whole autograph thing. Somewhere around 2000, 2001, I got the autograph bug. So not only did I want to go to the shows for the autographs, I wanted to see the panels. And Creation, they were the ones who had the best guests, but they were also the most expensive. That's when the tide really started to turn price-wise. I would go to these shows that were in California. I went to Burbank, Pasadena, and they were what they called the Grand Slam shows. These were not specific to Star Trek or Star Wars. It was everything. The first one I went to, they had a Lost panel. Evangeline Lilly was there, Naveen Andrews, Ian Somerhalder. So that was really great. You had you had Firefly guests. It was like a little bit like a Chinese food menu, a little from each column, which was great. But then they really started killing you with the photo ops. If you wanted your picture taken with somebody like Leonard Nimoy or William Shatner, it cost you $75.
Not only the photo ops to just approach them and take their picture, but a lot of these places, from what I understand, have like a professional setup where you could pay way more money to get a picture taken.
You're absolutely right about the professional photography at these conventions. In fact, if you wanted your photos taken with the A-list actors at creation shows, you had to have it done with a professional photographer. You couldn't have it done at the autographing table. They would stop you. They would take your camera away. If the actor would not pose for you, you could take a picture of the actor, but you couldn't take a picture with the actor. And what ended up happening was all the smaller conventions got the idea from creation and stole the photo op concept, and now pretty much that's the only way to do it, which is really sad. Luckily for me, I kind of got in under the wire with that, got all my pictures. I'm not saying I've seen every actor I've ever wanted to see, but I'd say a good 75 to 80% of the people I wanted to meet, I've gotten the chance to meet. Also, with the autograph pricing, what I would do, because if I was going to California, I wanted to get the full experience. So I was willing to shell out the money to get the good seats. The photo ops were extra. The autographs would be included in the ticket price.
Well, that's another thing you mentioned, the good seats. At one point, they started to introduce the VIP tickets.
I would buy the VIP tickets. I would get the gold pass. It would probably run upwards of $400. That would get you excellent seats. It would get you usually about 13 or 14 autographs. But you see, here's another thing that Creation started to do with their autographing policy, which really annoyed me. To keep things going, the line moving, they would only allow the actor to sign their name. Now, a lot of people don't care about that, but for me, I wanted a personalized autograph. So even though that it would become worthless in terms of selling, resale, I wanted it written to Steve.
Well, that's a good point, and you figure they would want to put their names on it, because I know a lot of actors personalize on purpose because they don't want you reselling it with a blank slate to someone else. They want you to keep it.
A perfect example of that is Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill, he could have a line going to Timbuktu, but he wants to write to everybody, whoever's your name is, and he demands that. Now, for me, that's what I wanted. So what I would end up doing, you'd get up to the actor's table, there'd usually be two handlers on either side, two big bruisers, and, you know, they just kind of keep the line moving, and I would be like, "Excuse me, Mr. Shatner, could you please write it through?" You know, and then the person would say, no, he can't do that. And I've had a lot of actors say to the convention person, "It's no big deal." I've actually had a lot of them look at them and just write it like real quick, but I've never had somebody tell me no. I've never asked William Shatner to do it, but the majority of the actors, they don't want it sold again, so they're happy to do it.
But they also have, I'm sure, you know, the bad cop with them. The guy works for him, and he's there just to nag him on purpose, just to nag the crowd.
There's one perfect example of that, Adam West, who I've met several times, and I've only got his autograph once because he has a bad cop that he always brings, and I've seen the guy 2 or 3 times, and people have written about this guy on web forums.
You should get his autograph.
This guy is the biggest, I won't say what I'm thinking, but he's not a nice guy. And I remember, I might actually be the one who started this. I remember I was at a Chiller convention, and Adam West was there, and Burt Ward, and other people from Batman, and I really wanted my picture with Adam West, and they were not doing it. So I went up to this guy, this California surfer-looking dude with the blonde, wavy hair and the spray-on tan, and he's the one. Adam looks at him and says, "Oh, can we do this?" "Oh, I don't think we can do this." And he's like, "No, Adam, we can't do that. I'm not letting you do that." And meanwhile, it's Adam who's telling him to say this. But I walked up to the guy and I said, "Listen, I'll give you $20 if you let me take Adam's picture with Adam." And he's like, "Okay." He said, "Adam, take a picture with this guy." I might be the guy who started the whole...
And who gets the $20, Adam or the guy?
Maybe they split it. The guy must get like a commission. I don't know if he's his agent or his publicist or what the hell he is. But he's really hated. So that kind of brings us up to today in terms of conventions. I actually took a bunch of years off because I bought a house, and I haven't been able to go as crazy as I used to. And also, too, because I've really met predominantly all the people I'd like to meet, unless they come up with some new show. I've met people from Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar, Firefly. I mentioned Lost before. So I've kind of had my day in the sun. And it's nice to be here today because I haven't been to a show in several years. And it's pretty crazy. It's not like anything I'm used to.
Right. This is not an autograph show. This is a huge monster of a convention. You know, the autograph shows still happen. And from what I understand, the few times I've been to those, there are more subdued, calm places. It's basically one big room. Half the room is autographed. The other half is a dealer room. This is just insane how big it is. And from what I understand, I was here last year. The room that we are in today is twice as big as it was last year. They've expanded. This whole room we didn't have access to last year. There's another section that you actually have to walk north of this side where they have the autograph section and some of the other presentation sections that we did not have access to last year either. So they actually expanded. Not only did they expand in size and rooms, they expanded day-wise. They added an extra day this week, a fourth day, which was yesterday, Thursday. Last year was only 3 days. This year is 4 days.
I actually had an opportunity, just to bring the whole thing full circle, to attend a panel a few hours ago with my hero, Stan Lee, who is still kicking around. He's almost 90 years old, but you'd never know it. He doesn't look a day over 75.
Is he still actively involved in Marvel, or is he more like an honorary?
Honorary. He's what they call chairman emeritus, which means he gets a big check for doing nothing, for just being Stan. But it's also kind of interesting. He doesn't work with Marvel in any real capacity anymore, and he hasn't for many, many years. He does cameos in all the movies, and as I said, he still gets a big check, and he lives in Beverly Hills, and he just gets to kind of live off the reputation that he has for creating all the greatest, in my opinion, greatest comic characters ever created. Today, he was part of a panel where they were talking about a comic that was, I didn't realize this, MTV has a comic book arm, and they do comics, and it's called MTV Comics, and they're putting out a comic called The Seekers, and it's basically, the Seekers are an alien race that are much more technologically advanced than we are, and what they do is they send out representatives to different planets that are less advanced than they are to monitor their progress, to see how far advanced they're getting.
If they're ready to join the Federation, basically?
Actually, just the opposite, because what they want to do is, if they get too big for their britches, I think they want to blow us up. They want to make sure that they're not going to become more powerful than they are. So they're monitoring us, kind of keeping an eye out to see that we don't get too powerful. Now, what's interesting about this, it's not really that new of a concept. Marvel, in fact, has 30 years ago put out a comic that was very similar called The Eternals, which Stan had nothing to do with. But what's interesting to note here is that Stan has, for probably the last almost 20 years, been sort of an independent contractor when it came to comics. Anybody who wanted to work with Stan could work with Stan, and he would create concepts, superheroes. He did a reality TV show for the Sci-Fi Channel. He did an animated series called Stripperella with Pamela Anderson. Basically, you hand Stan the check, and he's on board. Now, whether Stan comes up with these concepts on his own or lends his name to these concepts, it's a little bit of a gray area. In this case, the concept was handed to Stan, and he was given the task of judging potential writers and artists. So MTV got hundreds and hundreds of submissions. Stan and Stan's people, I'm sure, had to weed through them, and Stan chose the writer, chose the artist. So today at the panel, they introduced the writer and the artist and showed some sketches, explained the concept a little bit more in depth, and Stan was basically there just to kind of give them his blessing, because actually, once he did that, that was it. Stan was like, I have to go to another panel. So it was great to see him, to take his picture. You know, it's great to see him still active. He's got a mind that just comes up with concepts. Sometimes they're not that great, but I mean, when you're the guy who's done what he's done, and you've created Spider-Man and the Hulk and the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, you can be forgiven for some of the stuff you do in your old age. But it was great for me just to see him again, probably for the last time, I'm sure. You know, it's just great to be here.
That was Steve Avona letting us know about his convention experience today. And I would like to remind everybody that this is going to be a multi-part series. We are going to have multiple episodes of New York Comic Con with a lot of our different guests that we had, we were able to interview, including some exhibitors, artists, and a couple of surprises here or there, aside from our contributors. Ourselves. We are interviewing ourselves as usual. We are going to have future episodes. They're not all going to be back to back. We're going to scatter them around a little bit. This way they last a while because we have so much information that we were able to gather. And we're going to kind of disperse these episodes throughout the October, November, maybe even into a little bit of December. So please join us again next time when we do another episode, and hopefully you'll look forward to another one of our Comic-Con specials. Thanks everybody for listening, and see you again here on GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye.
She's a looker, that's what they say. She's got it all, yeah, she's got it made. She's a looker with a beautiful face, always on display.
Stop.